You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for being here, as always. We love having you as the greatest audience ever known to man, woman, dog, child, people, insect, whatever. We love you. Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. You can now see us on TikTok at TikTok Chris Voss 1 and the Chris Voss Show podcast. Today we have an amazing multi-book author. She's on the show with us and joins us today. She has written her latest book, April 11th. It came out 2023. Real Life: The Journey from Isolation to Openness and Freedom. Sharon Salzberg joins us on the show today, and she is a very prolific writer. She's written a multitude of books we'll get into here in a bit, but she is a meditation pioneer and a world-renowned teacher and New York Times bestselling author. She is one of the first to bring mindfulness and loving kindness meditation to mainstream American culture for over 45 years, inspiring generations of meditation teachers and wellness influencers. She is the co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts, and the author of 12 books, including the New York Times bestseller Real Happiness, now in its second edition, and her seminal work, Loving Kindness. Her forthcoming release, the one that we're talking about today, is kicked off, and her podcast, The Meta Hour, has amassed 6 million downloads and features interviews with thought leaders in the mindfulness movement and beyond. Welcome to the show, Sharon. How are you?
I'm great. It's very nice to be with you.
It's very great to have you as well. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
Sure. It's SharonSalzberg.com. Salzberg is spelled with an E, not a U. Spell check's going to try to change that. Don't let it do that.
Don't let it do that. Don't let it do that. So give us an idea of what made you motivated to write your latest book, please.
Well, like many people, though not everyone, I was in pretty severe lockdown during COVID, and I was here in Barre, Massachusetts, where the Insight Meditation Society is. I come up here from New York City in kind of mid-March thinking, I'll go up there for 2 weeks and ride it out. And I was just here for a very long time. And so I have written other books, and I was moved to kind of write about my experience, like what I was relying on, what I was counting on, what was supporting me, the difficulties I and so many were facing, and the tremendous loss in some way that so many people were experiencing, either of a person, a beloved, or just circumstance. Like I wasn't expecting to be here. My life was in great upheaval, like so many, and so I thought, okay, what's the thread that's helping me, and what's the thread that's helping others that I know, and let me try to convey that.
There definitely. I mean, it was such an interesting time, and so many people wrote so many amazing books. So many amazing books during this time that people were using. It was quite incredible, all the different experiences people have. So give us a 30,000-foot overview of this book.
The arc of this book is moving from those states where we feel most confined and trapped and constricted to states of openness and connection and freedom, and really looking at our experience. It's not so much the state itself, the emotion, the fear, the anger, whatever it might be, but it's getting lost in it, getting overwhelmed by it, seeing no way out, no options. That's really what is imprisoning us, and being able to relate differently to all of those with more kindness and compassion toward ourselves so we open up. And then in that openness, really fostering a sense of connection to others. And I realized that was a trajectory. First of all, I'd been on my whole life, and many of us are.
Hmm.
But it also could happen in changing a thought pattern.
Hmm.
Reminding myself, you know better than that. You don't need to go there. You've been there 50,000 times. How about trying this? You know, and it just like things got more creative for me as I was formulating it. And I thought, oh, that's a way for many.
You've written 12 books now. How do you think this book is different than the other ones you've written?
Partly my circumstance was really different. Like I wasn't traveling, which I was doing constantly
Hmm.
before then, and grabbing an hour to write or something like that. And it was just my life.
Hmm.
Was looking within and doing what I could do to try to help others, which was a massive amount of teaching online. And also, I was moved so much by what I was reading. I'm like a really habitual chat reader. And, I'd read these things as I was teaching meditation, which is what I do. Somebody would write, I live in a nursing home. I haven't had a visitor in a year.
Wow.
Or I went to see my mom in a nursing home, stood outside in the snow
Wow.
so I could see it through a window. It's like we forget, what it was like, especially in some areas. I work a lot whenever I can with the people we call caregivers,
Hmm.
those who either in their personal lives, their families, or in their professional lives are really in a way on the front lines of suffering and challenge and trying to help others. And, when people would say to me, people are not always able to say goodbye to their loved one as they're dying. They have to do it on an iPad. I would say someone holding that iPad.
Yeah. There's a
There's
human
someone who
being there.
day after day after day after day is bearing witness to this. And so I did it as much work as I possibly could with people in the medical professions or first responders or, firefighters, anybody, ambulance drivers, those people. And so I was learning such a huge amount. It was so moving to me that, and given the circumstances of not traveling, I was able to put it down on paper, so to speak.
There you go. It was a difficult time for a lot of people. My sister has MS. She's in a care center. We had to do the go stand outside the window, as you mentioned. We couldn't risk getting her COVID, especially in the early days when everyone's
Yeah.
like, I don't know what this is and what's going to
Yeah.
happen. My other sister, who was born with mental illness, had always been in homes. She was blind and partially deaf, and she was, I think, cerebral palsy. But after 40 years, she finally succumbed to just her seizures and normal health. And when we had the funeral, we just had myself and my mother at the funeral. I think someone from the
Hmm.
church. We couldn't have like a
Yeah. Yeah.
whole sort of thing, because COVID at funeral. I mean, of all the ironies, if someone died from that.
Yeah.
So it was a very hard time, very dark, murky. It's kind of sometimes I go to the store and I'm just like, God, we used to do this whole thing with masks and it was a crazy time. So you kind of address what happens when we feel alone, cut off, trapped, and how maybe we can use those sort of experiences to empower ourselves. Is that correct?
That's true because how we relate to those experiences is everything. And mostly we're not taught, unless we have a very unusual skill set, to relate well, for example, to our own fear. We usually condemn ourselves or we feel like we're weak or it shouldn't be there. Or, in my case, like I've been meditating for 50 years, for God's sake. Why is that still coming up? But to learn a whole other way of relating is a way out. And that's the irony of it. We think fighting and battling and hating what we're going through is a way out, and it's really not. But there's also the other side of it, which is don't forget to take in the joy. Sometimes
Mm.
we feel bad about that, like other people are going through so much. How dare I appreciate this sunset or, this child's smile or this great movie or whatever it is. But we need to,
Yeah.
you know.
A thing that helped me, and it actually, we've had our show for 14 years, and I don't know how much of our audience realizes this. I think I've talked about it before, but in 2000 when COVID hit, I was struck really hard with a lot of stuff. I mean, we were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in shows and events. And, we normally would go out to these big shows and interview people and CS and the NAB show and SEMA show and South by Southwest. And we normally would do all these interviews. And And there was a lot of different, just events, touring, speaking, all that sort of good stuff. And it all just it was planned out. It was guaranteed business, and it just collapsed. And so it was a lot of money. Not only that, it suddenly became that the money didn't really matter, and just about anything you owned didn't matter because your loved ones could possibly be taken from you. Um, and it was a very scary time. And I remember a friend of mine wrote on social media, he goes, "Here's what you do in this moment. You do one of two things. You either be a lifter and lift people up, or you find a lifter." And I was in a moment where I really needed a lifter. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm not good at trying to have other people lift me up. I just suck at that. And so I said, how could I be a lifter? And I took a look at my assets, and we changed the format of the Chris Voss show to go from interviewing CEO technology people and all this business silliness that we used to do that seemed silly at the time, I should say. And I said, we're going to open the scope up of the show. We're going to interview authors of all walks of life and everybody, and we're going to create more info entertainment. And it was what I wanted to do in my heart and what I felt good doing. And I tried to create shows that lifted and to be a lifter. And I've loved it ever since. And it's been a beautiful changeover. And we've had people like yourself on the show. But that whole be a lifter thing really gave me an empowerment to try and lift people up and inspire people. And hopefully it worked.
That's beautiful. And dare I diagnose you as a caregiver? Because
Probably.
that's exactly the pattern, that so
Yeah.
many people have. And people say to me, I'm not a hospice nurse, or I'm not
Mhm.
in that position of taking care of a family member, but in my friendships, just my ordinary connections, I find I'm always the giver. I feel very uncomfortable receiving.
Mm.
Might I be classified as a caregiver? And I say, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's a pattern so many of us have.
And it was a survival mode for me. I mean,
Mhm.
I've always been a bit of a comedian. I've always tried to make people laugh. I kind of get a juice off it like comedians do. It's almost like a crack cocaine when people laugh at your jokes, and you're like, yeah, let's do more of that. And my when people would call me from hospitals or going through different issues, call it childhood trauma, whatever you want to fucking call it, is the where I got it, but it works. It's a survival mechanism for me, but I make people laugh. I've had people call me from hospital bedrooms, and they're really in a dark place, and I'll start making them laugh and telling them nurse jokes and doctor jokes, and and then pretty soon they're laughing, and then pretty soon they're in a much better place. And so it's almost kind of self-survival mode, because there's a self-serving, self-love sort of thing to trying to help other people out. It's kind of when we give, we get, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I had a not very good hospitalization for pneumonia, and I wish I had your
Oh boy.
number. That
Well,
was
you
really
know who to
good.
call next time.
I do. Um,
Hopefully you won't be in the hospital
yeah,
anytime
no,
soon. But yeah, if you ever
yeah,
get that hangnail, just give me a ring.
I shall. And it's fine. Sometimes it's out of balance. It is
Yeah.
a survival mode. I really agree with you. And so many of the things that we have patterns for are adaptations, and they were really smart.
Hmm.
Maybe for a very long time. And yet, sometimes when it's your only mode, or you don't see options, or you're just kind of tired,
Yeah.
it's nice to have some options that appear. And receiving it makes so many of us uncomfortable, because I'm the same way. But nonetheless, when you kind of sense someone with a balance, you think, oh, that looks interesting.
Yeah. I mean, even if I'm on the receiving end, I'm probably going to do jokes to make people laugh and be
Yeah.
decrepitating self, But you talk about some different things in the book on important things to ask ourselves. Why do I most deeply yearn for, or what? I'm sorry, what do I most deeply yearn for? What would I benefit from letting go of, and what do I believe is possible for me? I like these questions. They're very open ended and spacious. Tell us more.
Well, it's thinking of these changes as like a journey, and like any journey, we pack in a way. We're kind of saying, what do I want to take with me? What do I really would do I well leave behind?
Hmm.
And also, that framing kind of came strongly for me when I was actually sitting with a friend who was dying. It was
Wow.
some weeks before her dying, although because you never know, like
Mm-hmm.
if it was a day or some weeks, it turned out to be some weeks. But uh, she was at home, and uh, they set up a bed for her in kind of this den area
Wow.
overlooking a garden, and across the garden there was a courtyard, and there was another building, and at one point she said to me, she was kind of going in and out of clarity, and she said, basically, I have to pack. And I said, you have to pack? And she said, yeah, I have to pack. I have to go over there, and I have to I have to cross the courtyard, and I have to bring all this stuff with me.
Wow.
So it didn't occur to me what she was sort of saying for about 45 minutes, so I just kept saying, everybody loves you. I love you,
Mm-hmm.
you're not alone, whatever. And then 45 minutes later, it struck me what across the courtyard probably meant.
Wow.
And I said, remember when you were saying you had to pack all this stuff to take it across the courtyard? You don't have to take anything with you. It's
Wow.
okay. You can just go. You
Hmm.
can just go. Don't worry about those things.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, really? And I said, yeah, really. You can just go. And
Wow.
and that's when that framing got really strong for me. I thought, what are we dragging along, that maybe we don't need tomorrow even, you know?
That's brilliant. So if I understand you correctly, maybe we should quit carrying all this stuff, this baggage we have around through life, because when we die, it's gone, and
It's
it's
gone.
probably not going to matter for a hill of beans. Like I don't know if your utility payments due or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't have to be wild and reckless, but
Yeah.
really, it's like
No.
the things we worry about and the grudges and, what does so and so think of me? It's like, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? It's true though. But it's I remember the old Fight Club scene where it's like, we buy things to impress people who don't give a shit about us.
Yeah.
Yeah, like no one cares if Chris Voss has a designer bag or not. I can't even name design. I was trying to think of one off the top of my head, but no one cares. I
No one
mean,
cares.
I used to live my life where I would buy things to impress people,
Mhm,
and I did it for myself. I grew up poor, so I would buy things,
mhm, mhm.
to impress myself. But I also thought, well, people see me in this nice car, they're going to be like, holy crap, what an amazing gentleman that Chris is. And usually people are just like, no, he's still an asshole. Which hasn't changed actually over the years.
Or
But
I
no,
would bet all those people you call when they're in the hospital, when they hear your name, they don't think, "That was a great car he had."
yeah,
Right?
that's true. That's
Yeah.
a really good point, isn't it? Yeah. They were like, wow, he's really funny, but then they were like, he's still an asshole. Um, but no, yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff we carry a lot of stuff. Like one of the challenges I think everyone has, I assume everyone has, maybe unless you're a narcissist, is you worry about the past. You think about past things. You're like, oh God, I wish I hadn't hurt that person or offended that person or said that stupid thing, or I can see how when I did this, it caused this, and that was hurtful to maybe some other people's or hurtful to myself. And and we worry about all this crap that we can't change. You can't change the past, right? And so I think probably what you said plays a lot into that, doesn't it?
I think it really does. I think there's a useful or skillful way of checking out those things, because
Hmm.
first of all, they check us out, they stay with us. So, they come back and we think about them whether we want to or not. But, it's kind of like lessons learned.
Hmm.
I realize that those circumstances, I'm usually so quiet. I don't speak my mind. That's a mistake.
Hmm.
I'm going to really try to be different,
Hmm.
going forward. And we fall down, but we can have that intention, and that's really important. Or maybe making amends in some situations, like that really stopped that person in their tracks. I think I'd feel better if I mean, I was just talking to somebody about a decision they had to make about their life and their marriage and so on. And I said, do you sense which path you might take in which you'll have the least regret,
Hmm.
and which one you might be really haunted by regret?
Wow.
And so those are important considerations. But there's something else we do,
Hmm.
which is more like a wholesale condemnation. Like, not just I said that stupid thing, I'm going to try to be better. It's like, I am so stupid. I am so bad. I always will be. There's no hope for me. I could never change. And so it's just this massive kind of lacerating self-hatred that leads nowhere.
Mhm.
So it's not useful, it's not helpful, and it's so painful.
Yeah. I like how you frame the question, though. I've heard that the power of a good quality life is the questions you ask, because it opens us up, as you've talked about in your book, to seeing everything that could be possible. And framing the question the way you said it is really interesting, because you're addressing, you know, which might you regret less, or which path should you consider? Because sometimes people don't really consider the past; they just kind of go down them, and they go, "Well, I guess we're down this road."
Yeah. Yeah.
And framing it in a way that, like, what are the downsides of this? Because a lot of people, like, hey, I'm going to go buy a new car today. We'll just throw that around as a thing, since we're kicking around the show. And you're like, I'm going to go buy XYZ car. And should I buy, the big giant gas guzzler car, the electronic vehicle? We'll just throw that around for fun.
Mhm.
And so you're like, I don't know which car is going to bring me regret, like the gas guzzler, and then gas goes to $5 per gallon. There might be some regret there. And the EV, whatever the thing is there. And so I like the concept of thinking about, what's the potential for the most regret.
There's also, I mean, that's a great example because, there's also the possibility of considering, like, what might I have to give up in order to get
Ah,
that object or that experience or something like that? Because
ah.
sometimes we're willing to compromise a lot. Like, I'll work day and night and
hmm
never see my beautiful new car because I have no time.
I'm working two jobs, and I never get time to drive the thing.
Exactly.
There you go. I like that idea. I love how you frame that and think about the different variations of result. And by pre-thinking through that, hopefully you can make better decisions, right?
Yeah. And it's just more joy.
Joy is good too. Though we should
Joy is
get
very
some joy
good.
in there as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, yeah. I note to self: work on the joy part. You talk about taking some risks with what we dare to imagine. Once again, I love that line. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you would.
Well, I remember conversations, different conversations I've had with people, which are reflective of states I've been in, as well, which are more like maybe I could be a little bit happier, or, maybe a slight improvement. And
Yeah,
you think, why bother? Like, really, I think truly we are capable of a great deal.
yeah.
And it's not because of circumstances, even. It's not because of the perfect car or,
Mhm,
stable of cars or whatever, because we all know people who may not have any of that, and they seem to be very fulfilled human beings
mhm,
anyway. And there's something else that can happen through feeling connected, feeling caring,
mhm,
um, remembering to take in the joy, not overlooking those small things, not being brought down by falling down, but learning how to pick yourself up or let others help you up
there you
and
go.
going forward, things like that.
Yeah. One other thing you're talking about is taking interest in people we might normally try to avoid. Why is that important?
Well, I think, even before the pandemic, I kept reading about an epidemic of loneliness,
Mm,
not only in this country, but in different places around the world. And I kept thinking, and I'd also be reading about the healing potential in social connection in different clinical conditions, like you're suffering from this or you're suffering from that. Like, what does your social connection look like? And I kept thinking, well, it can't just be a numbers game. Like, I only
mhm,
have two friends, I need 18. It must be some inner sense of being interested in people and, feeling connected. You go to the grocery store, you remember to thank somebody,
mm.
who's helped you out instead of just ignoring them or considering them as part of the furniture or something,
Wow.
and there's so much of our day, we're just in another world, we're disconnected. And not even because we dislike someone, but just indifference. We hardly notice them.
Yeah. And I love the concept of that framing of taking an interest in people we'd normally try and avoid, because I think we do kind of get in a selfish mode.
Hmm.
I remember hearing years and years ago Larry King say why he loved interviewing people and talking to people. He goes, I have an innate, something along the lines of saying, I have an innate curiosity to people, the lives they live, why they chose the paths they did. To me, life is like a giant forest of pathways and trees,
Hmm.
a wilderness of mirrors, maybe, if it were. And we choose to go down these different paths. And some of what you've written in your book is talking about opening up as to maybe making some better choices of the forks in the road we go down and
Yeah.
rethinking them, instead of, like I said, you end up down, you go left and you're just like, maybe I should go back, but fuck, we're on this road. Um, and so to me, people are really curious. Like I used to have this attitude that, like, I don't know, whatever way I was going through life was the right way and everyone else was wrong. My dad was a bit of a narcissist, rubbed off, I guess. But then I realized that there is no right way, and people are interesting. People have journeys, and there's things you can learn from them.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested. I've always just kind of learned to have an interest in people, like what makes them tick, what makes you do things, and that's why I love the shows, because I had people
Yeah, you
who
have the perfect livelihood. You
I
really do
do.
well.
And that's why I
Yeah.
enjoy, it's one of the few things I've ever done
Yeah.
in my life that I truly, truly enjoy. Like, I do this I do this regardless of anything. If I was homeless, I'd do this.
Hmm.
I don't know,
Hmm.
it'd be a little bit hard to pay for all the upkeep, but I to me, people are interesting. I get on a plane and I love talking to people. And usually I'll buy drinks, and usually by the time I'm done, I've got like two or three rows laughing their ass off at me and whatever stupid shit I'm doing. And the waitresses or the flight attendants love me and give me free
Yeah.
drinks. And so but it's interesting to inquire about people, find out about them, what makes them tick, what's
Hmm.
their journey, where'd they get there, and how's it going, eh?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it expands our mind, I think, in our optic scope.
Oh yeah, I think it's great. And I'm from New York originally, and I've had people in New York say, New York used to be the kind of place where you would strike up a casual conversation with like the person sitting next to you on the bus. Now everyone's on their phones,
Mhm.
and so they feel much lonelier, because
Yeah.
those conversations enrich their day.
Yeah. What were you saying? I was looking at my phone. The No, you're right. We have this social modicum. I don't know what the right word is, where we're all looking at our phones. And like, I remember when I first started seeing the iPads and the iPhones really catching on, and I would go out to dinner, and I'm a single guy, so I usually look around at other people. I'm a people watcher, of course, and I would see whole families. There'd be two kids and a wife and husband, and they're all looking at their phones eating Subway, or whatever. And you're like, that looks like the morgue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You're like, you're like, wow, that looks fun. And like no one's talking to each other, just eating in silence, and like no one acknowledges each other, and
hmm,
no one's like, how's
hmm,
your day? And I grew up in a family where, we had to sit around the table, eh? We had to talk to each other, which usually ended up in a fight, but it was the 70s. Maybe we need more of that now. We need more fighting, or maybe we should talk to each other to find out what the hell's going on.
yeah. At
Uh,
least aliveness, right?
yeah. What's interesting to me too, that I always find really interesting, is my friends that are married will text each other sometimes when they're in the same room with each other, and sometimes they're trying to say stuff they can't say around the kids, but other times they're just talking about crap, and you're just like seriously, like what the hell. I remember hearing that there was some people that had a car accident because the wife and husband were sitting next to each other in the car texting each other.
Wow.
And you're like, you're sitting next to each other in the car talking. What? I mean, there's a real intimacy loss that we have, I think, in our society because of the
Yeah,
electronic devices.
yeah.
Yeah. And so there's probably more of a search for a lot of what people do in there. What have we touched on in your book that we should tease out to get people to pick it up?
Um, let's see my book. uh, I think what I was trying to kind of cover both sides. We can deal with the challenges and the difficulties in a
Mhm.
whole other way. We're capable of that. And we can remember to reach for the joy and allow that to happen. And if we can work with each of those, and they're very workable, then
Mhm.
so much happens, so much emerges, like a whole other sense of creativity and connection and clarity. And as you're, pointing to a sense of possibility. I don't have
Mhm.
to be so stuck. I don't have to feel like I'm in this rut. And I think, um, one of my previous books was named Real Happiness by the publisher, and that
Mhm.
put me on the real train. After that, I had like 5 books with real in the title. And this one, I think it really belongs on the title, because we don't have a sense of living an authentic life sometimes, but we can.
Yeah. And is that really what the search is for? Try and be more authentic with ourselves and people in our lives?
I think so, because I don't that's why I think the loneliness is there, is 'cause, we don't feel seen, we don't feel like we're seeing others,
Mhm.
but we can, we don't have to be that disconnected.
Yeah. It's and maybe sometimes when we're lonely, that's the thing to do. I learned with when in gratitude, sometimes my most darkest moments in life when I'm struggling, there's been times where I've had financial trials and tribulations over 55 years. Um, Sometimes the best time when I'm not receiving anything is to go out and give. And there's been moments in my life and stories in my life where I've just said, "Well, things aren't working. I'm going to go help somebody." You know, I have nothing. I have almost nothing to give except just maybe some physical labor help, and I'll go help somebody with something. Um, and that has been the most biggest blessing. And it's almost like I don't want to say it's the cause of, well, if I when I go out and give stuff, I get stuff, but it definitely made a difference in being
Mhm.
grateful for where I was and kind of putting me back into a context of the simplicity of it all and being grateful and realizing that maybe some of the BS I was feeding myself about myself wasn't as important as I thought it was.
Well, even in, very pressing circumstances, very difficult circumstances, I think what you just said is so powerfully true. Like
Hmm.
I started a retreat center. I co-founded a retreat center here in Massachusetts in 1976. It's the Insight Meditation Society. It's just next door to me through the forest. And I have a house here that someone built, the founding teachers. And I spent February 2020 traveling throughout California teaching meditation. And I got back to New York City where I had a rented apartment in early March. And then I was teaching, I think it was March 9th, in a completely airless room in a basement somewhere in a museum.
Uh-huh.
And everyone, March 9th, New York City, people are incredibly anxious and having so much difficulty, and people are starting to get sick, and people in nursing homes are starting to get sick. And there we were. And the system in that particular setting of teaching is that the speaker sits in the audience in the front row until they're formally introduced. Then you get up on the stage and you start leading. And so I was sitting in the audience and next to this woman who was phenomenally anxious, like beside herself. Should I be here? I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I should be anywhere. And I said to her, because I'm a meditation teacher, well, there's certain breathing techniques that you can use. And the fundamental of that is that if your out breath is longer than your in breath, the parasympathetic nervous system is said to take over from the sympathetic nervous system, and you kind of chill. Your blood pressure is likely to go down and you get more relaxed. So I said, well, there are these breathing techniques you could use. She wasn't interested at all. So then I said, well, there's a particular form of meditation, which I kind of specialize in, called loving kindness meditation,
Hmm.
where you think of others and you're offering good wishes. And she wasn't interested in that at all. So I just looked at her and I said, can you help anybody? And she got radiant. She like lit up and she said, I have this elderly neighbor. Maybe I could slip a note under her door and see if I could go buy her groceries or something like that. And I thought, look at that.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. It's interesting sometimes that maybe giving is getting outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe now
Yeah.
that I think about it, and so this is wonderful. And I love the questions you ask in the book and how you frame it. So kind of does help us get outside of ourselves. Anything more you want to tease out in the book, Sharon, before we go?
No, and I do have meditation instructions in the back in the
Mm.
appendix for people who are, interested in that particular way of checking things out.
There you go. There's a lot of people that love meditation. I know Howard Stern,
Mhm,
and I think his mother was the one who introduced him to I think it's transcendental
mhm,
meditation,
mhm, mhm.
and it's supposed to really help them. I don't know. It's Howard Stern still. No, I'm just kidding. He's a fine gentleman. It's just a joke there. But no, it seems to help a lot of people and stuff. I think I've suggested to my mom, and it's been suggested to me, but I think we're going for frontal lobotomy, so we're going to forego the meditation.
If you
Um,
ever decide to, just as I have your number now to call you when I'm in the should I ever be in the hospital
there
again,
you go.
then you have my number. You can call me if you ever want to
There you
meditate.
go. I'll have to look up some meditation jokes.
Okay.
What did the yogis say to the? I don't know. I'll have to figure
Hot dog
something out.
vendor, you can try
Yeah, the
that
hot
one.
dog man. I don't know. There. You probably know lots of meditation
I
jokes.
probably
So
do.
there you go. Well, Sharon, thank you very much for coming on the show. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Sure, it's SharonSalzberg.com.
There you go. And thanks for tuning into my audience. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, youtube.com/Chris Foss, and linkedin.com/Chris Foss. And also see us over on, what is it, TikTok. And we're Chris Foss 1 over there and the Chris Foss Show podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.